This discourse is never ending. Can we please put it to bed now? I'm literally begging.
Oh my god. Do you think anyone will notice?
Oh my god.
We really have to start teaching media literacy in schools again. Over the last few years, there's been an uptick in weird puritanical views, particularly in my generation, where suddenly media is being held to a much higher standard, and in particular portrayals of morally wrong, or overly violent, or sexually explicit content is all being criticized by people who don't understand that just because they don't like something doesn't mean it's automatically bad. It's the TikTokification of media literacy. I had actually planned to make a video about exactly this topic about a year ago, discussing the discourse around sex scenes on TV and the differing societal reactions to that over time, and also how my own opinion has changed on the whole sex scenes shouldn't exist if they don't contribute to the plot discourse. But I got busy and had bigger projects to work on, so I shelved it for a while. I was always planning to come back to it, but I didn't expect the call to be coming from inside the house. Because this has all come up again in the last few weeks because the second season of Heartstopper has dropped around the same time as a BL called Only Friends has started. And they could not be on more opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of queer representation. That doesn't make either of them less valid. It just means they're portraying very different aspects of the queer experience. But you would think otherwise from the reactions online. So what's the deal? Heartstopper is a 2022 Netflix show about two boys falling in love based on a graphic novel by Alice Oseman, a queer Arrow-Ace author who deserves all the praise they can get for writing not only queer stories, but an entire novel about realizing you're on the ace spectrum. Everybody go read Loveless right now. And Only Friends is a Thai BL series about a messy group of gays who are all sleeping with each other, with other people, and generally causing absolute havoc on their interpersonal relationships. It's directed by Jojo Titchcorn, a popular queer director who explicitly got into the industry because he felt that gay characters were typically either represented as sassy, tragic figures or as cute schoolboy couples, and wanted to expand that into more diverse queer representation. Now, in the days and weeks since these shows dropped and or started airing, the same discourse that rears its ugly head every few months has sprung up again. Some people are angry that the sexualized content exists and blame it for bringing down queer representation, and some people are angry that Heartstopper isn't sexy enough, and they don't want to watch the overly sanitized high school romance. And this is the same discourse that rears its ugly head with every single new piece of queer media that comes out. The exact same thing happened with Red, White and Royal Blue. And actually, quick sidebar, Red, White and Royal Blue is a rom-com based on a novel by Casey McQuiston, a non-binary queer author about the first son of the US president falling in love with the Prince of England. Well, one of them. It's a little bit enemies to friends to lovers, it's a lot bit cheesy, and it's made waves not just as a popular gay novel, but now as a popular gay rom-com. I actually refused to read it at first because I don't care about politicians or the royal family, so while I will watch or read almost anything with gay people in it, I did have a harder time finding enthusiasm for that plot. And then I read one of Casey's other novels, One Last Stop, and I became obsessed with it and decided to devour Red, White and Royal Blue like my life depended on it. And it was fantastic. It's a wonderful, funny, heartfelt romance novel with two delightful main characters, and the politician/monarchy stuff is really used mainly as an obstacle to their romance, which is both accurate and interesting. It's not trying to disrupt the way we see the world or make any kind of grand point, except let queer people love each other, which is honestly the best kind of story to tell. And as with the other things we'll be talking about today, there's discourse around the horny content in both the book and the movie. Because in the book, they're hooking up for a while before the feelings rear their ugly heads, and in the movie they follow a similar trajectory, although with significantly less specific scenes. But there are people on both sides of the argument complaining about it. As Tumblr user Super Pineapple Enthusiasm, excellent URL, oh my god, said, I find it so funny that some people don't like Red, White and Royal Blue because there's sex scenes every other page. Normally I'd skip them. If I did, I'd miss half the book. But some people don't like it because what the fuck, the smut is so not smutty half the time I don't even know what they're doing. And while I've personally read way too much explicit fanfic to think of Red, White and Royal Blue as spicy, there's something really beautiful about the smut. It focuses on what Alex and Henry are feeling and tracks their emotional journey and how their relationship changes. Don't hate on what you can't appreciate. They're making points. And they're just talking about the novel. When the film came out, two opposing camps formed. The ones that hated the thirsty scenes and didn't understand why they had to have them at all, and the ones that were annoyed that the film cut down on the steamy scenes from the book, and apparently having a beautiful scene where two men who are in love sleep together for the first time is somehow too vanilla for people who tuned in for the prince and the politician's son rom-com. If you want spice, you're looking in the wrong places. But I'll get to that in a minute. Like, does Red, White and Royal Blue hold up politically? No, but it's a rom-com, so why would you care? Things need to happen because of the plot, and getting into how the British royal family would actually react to one of the princes coming out as gay would boggle the mind and make you so frustrated that you consider treason. For legal reasons, this is a joke. Is the movie a perfect adaptation? No. But I understand why they made the changes they did, and for the most part, I really liked them. They were never going to fit it all in a 2-hour movie, and the book simply doesn't have enough content for a series. A BBC miniseries, perhaps. We all know how I feel about those. But honestly, this was the best case scenario from pretty much all angles. And yet, people will always find something to complain about. Which brings me right back to the situation at hand. And it's multi-layered, so I'm going to start with...
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die.
So Gen Z is looking pretty screwed right now, huh? Not just because of the impending climate apocalypse, although that is on the bingo card, but because growing up with unfettered access to every opinion on Earth, good and bad, blasted directly into your face from every screen, is probably gonna do some damage. Now, I'm a lower millennial / upper Gen Z girly, that 1997 to 2001 period where we remember not having phones or internet unless you're using the home computer, but got indoctrinated into the age of the internet fairly early, somewhere around adolescence and teen years. The void generation is what we jokingly refer to ourselves as. Cringe enough to be millennials, based enough to be Gen Z, and not really comfortable in either camp. Remember media literacy? Reading comprehension? Those were fun while they lasted, right? I'm being facetious, but also I'm kinda not, because have you seen the comment section of literally any video that exists? There are smart people out there. Hell, there are completely normal, average people with average takes out there, but from a quick peruse on any TikTok or scroll through Twitter replies, you wouldn't know it. It feels like people are actively getting dumber with every passing day. And maybe that's not true. Maybe people have always been this dumb, but now they have the opportunities to be louder. But that doesn't seem like the whole story, does it? Scientists are actively studying it, and with the rise of social media, the proliferation of conspiracy content and lies constantly packaged up as the truth coming from the most innocuous of places, it would be hard for anybody to get a foothold on what is actually real and what actually matters, but especially for somebody who grew up only knowing that kind of information highway. So Gen Z is a little bit screwed. Don't even get me started on Gen Alpha. And part of how they, or we, I guess technically, have been screwed over is in the constant moving of goalposts for what is quote-unquote acceptable. Like the recent Judy Garland controversy, for example. Because we can all agree that blackface is bad, and anybody that doesn't can go eat rocks, but that situation was insane. Pointing out that blackface is wrong is not a high bar for human decency. We should all do that. But we should also do that with the foresight to think about context before we put those opinions out into the world for everybody to see. Judy Garland was a child when she was in blackface, being mercilessly abused by every adult that was supposed to protect her and constantly drugged within an inch of her life. Post-childhood, once she could make more of her own decisions, she was a great advocate for people of colour in the black community, and she would probably tell you herself that blackface is abhorrent if we could talk to her today. But people want to cancel her anyway. The nuance has been completely stripped away from the situation so people can just point out that something is wrong, because thing bad. But the thing that's bad about that is the adults who made her do it. The people who were aware of the connotations of what they were doing and enforced them onto a child. That's not Judy Garland's responsibility. We can't make an abused child bear the brunt of racially motivated bigotry just because it's her face that's being used while those adults profited. Pointing out that something is bad doesn't make you a good person just because you identified it, especially when you're then using that identification to go after the one person in that situation who didn't have control over what she was doing. And this is where a lot of the Gen Z hates sex discourse is coming from too. Because it's getting shoved in front of these teens' faces every day that all forms of sex are bad. Even the portrayal of sexiness or any sort of non-gender conforming thing that people can lambast as sexual is considered the height of moral panic. It's on every news website, it's on TV, it's all over Twitter and TikTok. Corn is bad. Any words relating to sex are bad, actually, so censor them with stupid words on every social media site that exists until language means nothing anymore. Drag queens are evil. There's too much sex in in media nowadays. Kink should never be a pride. Shipping culture is disgusting. But also, don't forget to ship these real people as long as it's profitable. Sex is scary and it will always hurt for your first time. But asexuality isn't real and neither are trans people. They're all just made up terms for nonsense because I, a random person on the internet, said so. And because I have a platform, this will continue to be proliferated until the heat death of the universe. It's insane. I have school teacher friends, not just ones my age who are new to teaching, but also from my school days a decade ago, and all of them are saying that kids are a lot more likely to spout some totally unsubstantiated bullshit like it's fact now. And don't get me wrong, kids have always done this. But it was a lot harder to spread misinformation before now. Even when I was a kid, I remember discovering the concept of misinformation online. It was a big deal. It made an impact. Check your sources. But kids nowadays are just swimming in an ocean of information and misinformation, and it all just looks like fish. How are they supposed to know which ones are safe? As Ramona Slick tweeted, when are we going to talk about Gen Z becoming so hyper-aware from discourse that they've actually become prude and puritanical? Now, Ramona, we're talking about it now, because it's actively getting out of hand. Because here's where the crux of the issue lies. I think we've taught a generation of children that if something makes you uncomfortable, it's the thing that is wrong and not your own feelings you need to examine. Because TERFs decided that trans people were bad, not with any actual statistical proof, which we have for everything else, by the way. Cops, priests, politicians, show business. But because they don't like the way they feel when they look at trans people. That's literally all it is. They don't understand it and it makes them feel uncomfy. So they lash out like toddlers, and they're passing that down onto the kids. Because you can't scroll for 2 seconds on the internet without seeing the latest dirt brain take on trans people getting retweeted by every verified account on Twitter. And kids and teens don't always know when to go away and do more research. When I was a teenager, I was subscribed to Calvin Garra because he was the only trans YouTuber I had heard of, and I didn't know better. He hated non-binary people, so I thought all trans people hated non-binary people and assumed I should too, and it took me a hot minute to realize that wasn't the case at all. I am now actively genderqueer, by the way, but I had to go out of my way to seek out other voices in order to do that, and not everybody is going to take initiative like that. They'll see something, take it at face value, and just slot it right into their belief system without question, because the person saying it did it with enough authority and obscured enough evidence to make it believable. If you take anything away from this section, please let it be this. Just because something makes you feel uncomfortable or gives you the ick doesn't mean it's morally wrong. I get it. Most of the media makes it seem like this is a very black and white issue, and even those of you who are able to see the nuance might not always be able to pass it because of the speed information moves in at the year of our Lord 2023. But a show isn't evil just because it has sex scenes. People aren't bad just because they like certain kinks. Put a pin in that, I'm going to circle back to it later. Drag queens aren't creepy, and trans people aren't nonces just because right-wing people have decided they are. Yes, sometimes kids are exposed to things too young, and we should be mindful not to hinder their development. But sex education is not perverted. It's literally the opposite. Half the reason so many kids don't have a nuanced understanding of sexual content in the world is because of a lack of education and the most ignorant voices on the subject always being the loudest. Sex is not as divisive as the media keeps pretending it is, but you wouldn't be blamed for not understanding that when it's everywhere you look. And on the topic of divisive takes on sex, gay stuff isn't more sexual just because you decide it is. This has been a running theme of the last, literally all of time. Because cishet society is the norm, and so any deviation from that is an aberration. And because we call it a sexuality and not a romanceality or a people I am attracted to-uality, queer people have always been branded as somehow more sexual than cishet people. Including ace people, somehow? Although I have yet to see a right-wing person explain that take to me in a way that makes any sense. Matt Walsh has brainworms, in case you were wondering. To cishet people who've never had to examine their relationship to the world, gay people are more sexualized because their sexuality is explicitly about sleeping with people. It's the thing that makes them different from them. Gay men want to sleep with men. Lesbians want to sleep with women. Bisexuals want to sleep with everybody all of the time. There is only prey. Never mind that lesbian asexuals exist, ladies. Or biromantic men exist, gentlemen. Or non-binary arrow aces exist, a-enbies. The words they use to define themselves have the word sex in, and therefore it's all about who they sleep with. Let's ignore that heterosexuality follows the same linguistic framework, because cishet people who think of queer people in this way don't think of themselves as heterosexual. They think of themselves as normal. I've met some of these people, they're draining to be around. And despite all the progress we've done on gay rights in the last 50 years, and especially in the last 10 or so, there's still this antiquated idea floating around that the mere fact of being gay makes every action more sexual than straight people. Gay media gets flagged as inappropriate for the same thing straight media does. Gay kisses are seen as hornier for some reason, and heaven forbid they have a sex scene, that's basically guaranteed an R rating. Even if the straight movie also had steamy scenes, the gay one will be for restricted audiences, because we haven't been able to shake this ridiculous idea. It's the same reason why right-wing nutjobs cry bloody murder at children being taught what gay people are in schools, because A, if they're taught what it is, they might try it, and B, why would you teach them something so inappropriate? Absolutely. From the way they react, you'd think we were straight up opening Pornhub in classrooms, or giving 8-year-olds yaoi manga to flip through, when usually all we're actually doing is going, you know how your mum and dad love each other? Well, Kevin has 2 dads, and sometimes people have 2 mums, and that's not weird. It's actually perfectly normal. You might like one, or the other, or neither, or both, and all of that is okay. Okay? Cool. Now go hang out on the monkey bars with your friends. You don't need to mention sex at all in that conversation, because it's literally not relevant to the conversation. Who we love is sometimes relevant to who we sleep with, but not always. And right-wing grifters who accuse us of trying to groom children by teaching them that gay people exist are the only people in this situation who are overly sexualizing it, because they're incapable of seeing LGBTQ people as anything other than projections of their own sexual insecurities. Too far? Ooh, I'm coming for blood today. I should cool off. The point is, queer people aren't inherently more sexual than cishet people. And we need to start acknowledging that, especially in the way we rate and discuss movies and TV shows. For example, talking about BLs on my channel? It's more likely than you'd think. So as I mentioned, the big drama surrounding all of this has come from Heartstopper and OnlyFriends airing around at the same time, and igniting some of the arguments we've seen time and time again, including this comment Alice Oseman made a few years ago that has sparked a lot of controversy in the QL community. Yep, no explicit sex in this comic. The characters are teenagers, so it's just not appropriate, and even if they weren't, I'd have no interest in drawing that. I wouldn't describe this comic as yaoi or even BL. They're genres of comic that tend to fetishize and eroticize queer men in a really bad way. This comic is just a romance between 2 boys and a coming-of-age story. She had me in the first half, not gonna lie. As a quick aside, if anybody takes this as me hating on Alice Oseman and tries to bitch me out to them as if I am somehow their enemy, I am manifesting Lego directly beneath your bare feet. I named my dragon tattoo after them? For fuck's sake. Everybody say hello to Oseman. And vice versa, if anybody takes this as an excuse to go and pile on to Alice, I am personally going to hunt you for sport. Okay? Do not make me tap the sign. Like I said, the first half of this is perfectly fine. The characters are teenagers, so it is perfectly acceptable not to draw explicit sex scenes of them. And the same goes for the series. It would actually be much weirder if they did show those things. If you are not a teenager yourself, why do you want to see these teenage characters who are being played by teenage actors having sex on screen? Explain it to me like I'm 5. No, see, it's the second half of the comment that's the problem. I wouldn't describe this comic as yaoi or even BL. They're genres of comic that tend to fetishize and eroticize queer men in a really bad way. This comic is just a romance between 2 boys and a coming-of-age story. And to be fair, this comment was from a few years ago, and Alice may have updated their opinions on BL since then, but just so she knows, Heartstopper? Absolutely a BL. 2 boys falling in love in high school or university is literally the BL storyline. Off the top of my head, I can name like 10 without even having to think about it. Mr. Heart, Never Let Me Go, Cherry Blossoms After Winter, My Engineer, Enchanté, Save It Boys High School Council, My School Engineer, A Shoulder to Cry On, My Only 12%, Where Your Eyes Linger, My Gear in Your Gown, He's Coming to Me, Love by Chance, Color Rush, Dangerous Romance, you get the point. Heartstopper falls onto one side of the spectrum of BL, and shows like OnlyFriends fall onto the other, but that doesn't make OnlyFriends somehow wrong or bad representation just because it's for an older, thirstier audience. OnlyFriends is about a horny gay friend group, and I've seen countless shows about horny slutty straight groups. Hell, I've been in those friend groups. I've witnessed this exact behavior firsthand. Not done by me personally, obviously. I am neither slutty nor straight, but I never thought it was a weird or abhorrent behavior because we live in a cis-het allonormative society where that behavior is beyond normal. It only becomes an issue when it's gay. Because as mentioned earlier, we're inherently more sexualized. Not because of anything we've done, but because of an external fetishization of our identity done by people who can't fathom anything outside of their own view of the world. Yes, both yaoi and BL started as genres fetishizing queer men, largely by and for straight women to get off to. but both have evolved out of that. BL even more so in the last 5 years due to its explosion of popularity across Asia and the increasing involvement of almost exclusively queer voices in the conversation around it. Most BL and GL and QL content is just romances between two people, or coming-of-age stories, or murder mysteries, or time travel period dramas, or fantasy dramas, or cat-and-mouse cop mafia stories, or Groundhog Day-style time loops. You know, like how straight media is, except better. Because it's gay. BL isn't a negative label to give something, it's just a genre. That's like saying that the Netflix Marvel shows aren't superhero shows because they're gritty and realistic. They're still about superheroes, they're just from a different subset of the genre. It doesn't make regular superhero content somehow better or lesser. They're just labels. They're placed on things to define them, not degrade them. I'd also like to point out, for the record, that BL is not yaoi. I know I already brought this up in my BL video, but I'm incredibly tired of this conflation of BL content with yaoi content. The yaoi content debate is nuanced enough on its own, we will get to it, but BL has grown on its own so far from its origins that it can barely be classed as yaoi anymore anyway. In the last 5 years, particularly in Thailand, which is at the forefront of BL content, it's now made mostly by, with, and for queer people. BL fans online have taken to alternating it with the term QL because it is queer now, not just boys. We've got GLs and BLs and trans characters and ace characters and bi characters and every person on every spectrum. We've got writers and directors like Back Off No Panache and Jojo Titchikorn making two very different kinds of gay content for queer audiences. The quiet love stories and coming of age stories on one side and the horny bonkers content on the other. And it's all good. Everybody knows how I feel about Bad Buddy. Go watch it yesterday. It's one of the greatest coming-of-age love stories of all time. Physically fight me about it. And I've also brought up The Warp Effect before. It's fantastic and sex-positive and even has an ace storyline. But pretty much everything that both of these directors have made is incredible. They cannot help but make banger after banger, and I will be seated every single time. We've also got trans and non-binary people at the helm, like Nuchi and Nucha Bunyawatana and Golf Tanwarin, making stories about political unrest and gay rights and dismantling unjust power structures and capitalism. Everybody go watch Not Me and The Eclipse. They're on YouTube for free. You literally have no excuse not to. That goes for all of the Thai BLs, by the way. We've got polyamory and monogamy and hookups and sweet first romances. We've got love triangles and quadrangles and unrequited love and breakups and villainous gay characters and heroic gay characters and everything in between. I support gay rights and gay wrongs. It's not lesser than Western gay content just because it's BL. A lot of Western gay content also falls under the label of BL, but people just don't want to acknowledge it because they have assumptions about the label that they refuse to rectify. Which brings me to something that some of you are probably going to have some feelings about. Can we stop demonizing yaoi now? Look, I get it. Yaoi isn't for everyone. It isn't always for me. Sometimes it is. I've loved a lot of yaoi manga and manhwas, and the BLs that spawn from them. I like a lot of dumb yaoi tropes, and I hate a lot of regressive, vaguely homophobic yaoi tropes, but that's part and parcel with every genre of everything. Yes, sometimes yaoi is just straight up porn. But why is that bad? Why do we care so much? In my BL video, I talked about yaois, the origins of BL, and how it has since evolved out of those origins. And I was right, but so has yaoi. Weirdly, genres evolve out of their original forms. Sci-fi as it was created is not the same thing as sci-fi today. There's so much more and it's always expanding. Every genre is. Just because yaoi has its origins in horny content for sexually frustrated straight women, that does not invalidate it as a queer medium, and I think we would do well to remember that. I think yaoi and BL are still seen in this reductive way largely because of racism. Yeah, sorry, we're touching on literally all of the hot topics today. Because there are a lot of people out there who see Asian people as objects, which is horrible to say, but it is unfortunately true. And this includes people who claim to love the culture. I'm talking your weeaboos and your Koreaboos. Korean idol culture definitely perpetuates this, but I think Japan has it the worst. Japanese culture, particularly their exports like kawaii women, idol culture, anime, and yaoi, are all hypersexualized, and people who spend too much time online will reduce their entire knowledge of Japanese culture down to this viewpoint, and then get angry at people for participating in a culture that they have deemed as overly sexual in their own head, even if the thing people are participating in isn't actually that sexualized at all. Just because the most horny stuff makes it over here doesn't mean that's all there is. That's like saying that because Colleen Hoover books are popular, all romance novels are full of badly written sex scenes. Like, sure, a lot of them are, but also a lot of them are actually good. Reducing an entire genre down to its extremes is silly, and in some cases, can be actively harmful. Tumblr user Satan's Titties, side note, Everybody I've quoted today has an incredible URL. Discuss their own issues with the almost exclusively negative connotations people have around yaoi when they don't know anything about it aside from its origins. It took me my whole lifetime to accept the fact that I'm a feminine guy. Every time I was laughed at for being girly, non-violent, called a sissy, bitch, or worse, it hurt like hell. And when I realized I was attracted to boys, that was when I started to question whether I was a real man. It felt like a stab to the gut. I was there, little teenage me, reading BL because I couldn't connect with anything else I knew of. Straight romance didn't do anything for me. I watched Brokeback Mountain and liked it, but I couldn't relate to almost any part of it. I wanted to see boys who looked a bit like me, not big hunky adults with facial hair. And you people on here complain about straight girls squeeing and saying, my sinful gay babies. Guess what? I was around when you actually did see fangirls saying this type of thing. I was there consuming BL and slash by the truckful, ignoring the occasional homophobic comments from the author. I saw all the hate every other corner of fandom threw at BL fans, and you know what? None of that hate was because they had homophobic attitudes. It was purely because yaoi is for stupid girls, and they were ruining the source material with their dirty gay hands. If girls touched anything that was meant for boys, including male characters themselves, it was dirtied, ruined. Sound familiar? And the boys who liked BL, who preferred a romantic manga about androgynous guys slowly falling in love with cherry blossoms being swept by the wind in the background rather than just watching gay porn featuring masculine men? We weren't real men. If you thought there isn't a fuck ton of toxic masculinity in the gay male community, boy, do I have news for you. Feminine, camp, flamboyant men, they all made gays look bad. Because of us, cishet people wouldn't accept gay men as real men, so there were attempts to exclude us to protect the reputation of the unoffensive, masculine, macho gays. Yaoi's for cishet girls. You must be lying about being a gay man, you're obviously a straight girl. Nachi Fujo shits. If you have more MM than MF or FF ships, you're fetishizing MLM. It's so transparent. You feel so self-righteous expressing hate for women, plenty of whom are queer, but yeah, straight women too, having interests, and God forbid, sometimes sexual interests. Gasp! You dress it up as concern for MLM in the hopes that people will sympathize with your campaign to shame and harass women, men, and gender non-conforming folk for daring to like content not meant for them. Just like 4chan dude bros in the mid-2000s. Don't pretend this is about homophobia. You don't go after the exact same content if it's made by real men, featuring masculine macho real men. And let's not get into the rape, abuse, incest, racism, sexism, violence, and plethora of other problematic things that cis gay men portray in media. It puts dark BL and fic written by anyone else to shame. All that you're doing is misusing terms of a language you don't know, from a culture you're not part of, and fandoms you don't participate in, speaking over gay men and Asian fans, othering Asian people, and fostering an environment in which harassment of innocent fans is encouraged and marginalized people are used as scapegoats. I feel for the trans guys who go to fandoms to escape the hate and transphobia from the world only to be misgendered and sent hateful messages in the spaces they wanted to have fun in, who were already accused of faking it, of not being real men by bigots in the real world, and now have to face the same horrible things in fandom. I feel for the queer girls, some of whom may not even be attracted to men, but to whom BL and or slash means a lot, who often don't even have female characters to relate to, much less queer female characters, or simply can't relate to them very well for a variety of complex reasons. They seek refuge in fandom only to be misoriented, called cis-het, having their identity erased to push an agenda. And I feel for the straight cis girls who put genuine effort into educating themselves on queer issues, for whom fandom was a welcoming space where they could finally share their interests and be themselves, be allowed to have sexual interests. And now they're being called perverts, deviants, and being told that they taint everything they touch. Hey, anti-Fujoshi, I don't need your faux activism. Kindly take your misogyny, effemophobia, transphobia, and identity politics and leave us alone. Or listen to the people you're supposedly trying to protect. Sincerely, a gay, Asian, femme, queer as fuck Fudanchi. Now, I've cut that down a little, but I've linked it in the description if you want to read the whole thing. And if I find out that a single person is rude to them over this post, I will personally hunt you down. Do not make me tap the sign. But Satan's Titties raised an excellent point, which is something I've been saying for a while, which is that I'd always rather accidentally include straight people than exclude closeted queer people or force people to out themselves in order to validate their right to participate in the culture. I said it in my Kit Connor video and I'll say it again now. Nobody owes you their identity. If you see somebody at Pride and you think they're straight, that's a you problem. They could be bi, trans, non-binary, or even actively gay and just not presenting in a way you'd expect. And either way, it is not your fucking business. Sure, maybe people are just here for the porn, but even then, I don't think that's as bad as we've been making it out to be, because I'm about to have another unpopular opinion here, but fetishization isn't as bad as people make it out to be. either. I agree 100% that fetishizing cultures until you can't acknowledge the people from that culture as human beings is 100% wrong, and you need to get some actual mental help. Calling real human people semis online or speculating wildly about whether or not people top or bottom or whether they're gay and writing smut fic about them is a massive overstepping of so many boundaries, and if you post that stuff online and don't see how weird it is, you really do need to go outside and have conversations with real people. But fetishization isn't always as cut and dry as that, and to say that it is reductive. Like, yeah, don't reduce every single thing about a culture or a person to a fetish, but like, fetishes aren't wrong or evil. They're just a thing that exists. Most people have at least one, whether you talk about it publicly or take it to the grave. Some of them are seen as more normal than others, and I will never understand feet people, but I respect them enough to leave them to it. They only become wrong or evil when the people doing it refuse to engage on a holistic level with the thing they're fetishizing. So some yaoi content, okay, a lot of yaoi content, is partaking in the fetishization of gay men, but that's not always a bad thing. As previously mentioned by Satan's titties, the only place he felt represented when he was younger was in early yaoi and BL, where the effeminate androgynous twinks fell in love with each other without having to conform to cishet ideas of what relationships should look like. And yaoi absolutely perpetuated some harmful tropes and stereotypes of its own, but as I keep saying, it's a genre and it's constantly evolving. You're not automatically a bad person for having a fetish or a kink. If you're a straight woman, you're not automatically evil for consuming yaoi. All that we ask is that you don't reduce gay men, and in particular Asian men, down to the harmful stereotypes you see, and to try to understand the community more holistically than just seeing them as objects to sexualize. Same goes for men interested in lesbians too, by the way. The problem is, a lot of Western queer people don't want to claim yaoi because it's seen as lesser and not good enough. Which actually brings me to the main point of this video, which is that nothing is ever good enough. Aren't you tired? Seriously, aren't you tired? Isn't it exhausting complaining about every single new thing that comes out for not ticking every single inclusivity box or being good gay rep? It feels like we got so jaded as a community from being left out that when we finally did start getting representation, we had already rejected it, turned mean, decided nothing would ever be good enough to make up for years of oppression. Every single show has to bear the weight of the entire history of queer oppression on its back, and it must make up for it. But also, silly little shows that aren't as heavy should exist. But also, why aren't those shows taking into account the history? Oh my god, aren't you tired? Not every queer show needs to have the burden of those years of misery on its shoulders. Some of them can just be slutty. Some of them can just be cute high school love stories. We don't have to hold ourselves to this insane standard just to feel like we are getting seen the same as the hets. I don't want to be seen the same as the hets. As Tumblr user Dancer MK said, I'm a little disappointed to see so much discourse, fandom competitiveness, and plain arguing going around at the moment in regards to queer film and TV. People complaining about too much sex, not enough sex, too cheesy, made for the hets, too happy, too sad, too realistic, too unrealistic, and a million other petty issues. I, for one, am a queer person in my 50s. I grew up with practically zero representation. Yes, we want to continue onwards and upwards with quality and varied shows, but let's be happy we now have representation. Like, actual shows where the central characters are queer, not just a side character who gets fucking murdered. There is room for all different types of representation. So enjoy the types you like and let others enjoy what they like. Shows are allowed to just be. JoJo makes a lot of horny BL shows that, if you didn't know his history, you might assume were made to titillate straight audiences, if you're moving under the assumption that everything is for straight audiences. But if JoJo heard you say that, he'd tear you limb from limb and then tweet about it afterwards. In response to a comment somebody made about OnlyFriends saying that Thai BL only sells sex scenes, JoJo said, "It's coming in every episode. Because this is a series about sex and relationships. You're going to see a lot of it. Because relationships can be based purely on sex. I feel like, why, just because I'm gay, do I have to represent good things? There are so many series for you to choose from. I'm screaming for the prince, but I also like gay sluts too. No matter slut or good person," I think that's an iffy translation because JoJo definitely believes that sluts are good people, but we move. "They should be equally represented." Because that's one of the things we've been clamoring for years. Diverse content. Stories about every facet of the queer experience. But because one show doesn't perfectly represent all facets of the umbrella, it's not good enough? Verily Bitchy has a video called Why Queer TV is Getting Worse.
I think if these stories were being told about straight characters, the show would be unbelievably boring and universally panned. I genuinely think it is only considered good because it's the gays being nice and cute. But where is the line between good representation and just gay streaming? It's sanitized, it's depoliticized, it's designed for the broadest possible audience because Netflix has got to bring in those dollar bills, you know? Gay streaming creates the impression that we are a homogenous community with simple political issues that straight people can get behind. We just want love. Because love is love. Why can't the bullies understand that love is love? In the real world, bisexuals are stanky bitches.
And while it is a good video, and I agree with a lot of their points, I do worry that equating shows like Heartstopper with a trend towards good representation is a little reductive. Heartstopper is just one kind of representation, and it's marketed mainly at teenagers and queer people who missed out on those teenage experiences, and it ticks that box perfectly. It fills its niche and it's not trying to do any more than that. Messy queer content is simply a different box. I also feel, as I do with most conversations around queer TV, that it's seeing the world through a very Western lens. Just widen the scope a little bit out towards other countries and you'll have so much more to see, good and bad queer rep alike. It's literally right there. Just turn left.
I'm not sitting in a traffic jam. I'm going left. I'm going left. Left.
Tumblr user Mijo Monster reblogged Jojo's tweet from me with some really relevant tags. He's been saying so much, about how we deserve all kinds of queer stories. Queer people do fuck. We do have messy relationships. We softly crush and gently love. We do share queer joy with our friends. I can relate to Heartstopper and OnlyFriends, and I'm so glad we have them. Like, damn, sometimes I feel like messy queer stories really weed out fake allies that think sex is morality and slutty women and queers deserve no rights. They never actually cared about those other humans' rights. They just tolerated the ones whose lives conformed as easily as possible to what the straight person saw as still acceptable, the way some straight people want queer upstanding citizens who chastely kiss and are relatable to the suburban Americans. Maybe they'll tolerate Love Simon. But the second those queer people are broke minorities or genderqueer or slutty or make any decision outside white picket fence pictures, they're critiqued as bad, when in reality it's those straight people who aren't really allies, who hate seeing a queer person too unlike them, who isn't trying to conform. And okay, maybe you're like Verily Bitchy and Heartstopper really isn't for you. Or maybe you're a sex-repulsed asexual who hates seeing overly horny queer content. Here's my counter to both sides of that argument. You don't have to complain about the existence of one in order to enjoy the existence of another. You can just not watch the thing you don't like. Demanding things from one piece of media that doesn't fit within its framework or genre or tone, when media that does have that stuff is right there, left and right, is logical fallacy. Stop trying to fit a square peg in a round hole and just find your hole elsewhere. There's plenty to go around. And some of it might not be for you, but you don't get to limit yourself to only one kind of content and then complain when that content doesn't contain elements of completely different kinds of content. It's like walking into a field of sunflowers and going, where are the tulips? Stop asking for sex scenes in Heartstopper. Stop trying to remove the spice, the flavor from shows like OnlyFriends or yaoi manga. Just engage with the stuff you're comfortable with and avoid the stuff you don't. Why are we pitting two bad bitches against each other? Every 6 months, I swear, this argument swings back and forth like a fucking pendulum. Gay content isn't sexy enough, we're homogenizing the gays. And the gay content is too sexualized, just let us have a romance without turning us into objects of fetishization for once. The actual reality of queer content is usually somewhere in the middle, as everything usually is, because literally everything is a spectrum. Both groups are equally correct and equally misguided. Algorithms have ruined us. We just expect the content we want to show up directly in front of our faces, and if it doesn't, we assume it doesn't exist. But it does. It's all out there. It's just not always directly on your Netflix homepage. Sometimes it's literally on YouTube for free! You just have to find it. Every kind of content across the whole spectrum of sexualization, or lack thereof, in the queer community is available to you if you just look.
Derek, you did it! That was amazing!
I know! I turned left!
The existence of one doesn't invalidate the other, so why aren't we all hyping each other up at every available opportunity? Good Omens isn't any less queer representation than BLs, and BLs aren't any less queer representation than Heartstopper or Red, White and Royal Blue. It's all down to individual taste, and that's not something you get to decide for anybody else. And it's not like you're losing the audience from your soft media to your horny media. Most people who were gonna watch the slutty stuff probably weren't planning on watching the fluffy stuff, and vice versa. And for those of us who do watch both, they often act as free advertising for each other. I'll follow someone for posting about one, see them posting about another, and plan to watch it, because I want to consume all the gay content, and nobody can stop me. This also puts to bed a common refrain I see of, there aren't enough, insert adjective here, gay protagonists in media. Because, oh my god, I promise you, there are.
Trust me, gay is in, gay is hot. I want some gay it's gonna be. Nandor?
You want cringe fail gay protagonists? Be My Favorite is a Thai drama where the protagonist is a total fuck up in every way, and for the first few episodes is deliberately pretty unlikable in order to learn life lessons.
ใครไม่งอนชอบคนแดดประกาศตามแดดด้านข้างกู
He is one of the most cringe fail men of all time, and I love him. Big Dragon has one of the most messed up starts to a relationship I've ever seen, and they both trip ass backwards into a weirdly healthy relationship by the end of the show. But don't get me wrong, these are two of the dumbest, most embarrassing bitches ever put to film. I would die for them.
ทำอะไรอ่ะมึงก็ไม่มีวันชนะกูได้หรอกแล้วเรื่องเมื่อคืนมึงก็ไม่มีวันลืมมันได้ด้วย
Rain from Love in the Air is one of the stupidest people to ever exist. He's not muscly enough to be a himbo, he's just a straight up bimbo. He stumbles his way into a relationship with all the grace and poise of a baby giraffe falling down the stairs.
ผมโง่ก็ได้โง่ให้ทำอะไรไม่คิดผมก็ไม่มีสมองอย่างที่พี่พูดนั่นแหละคอยดูแล้วกันเด็กโง่คนนี้จะทำให้พี่ตกหลุมรักจนไม่กล้าว่าผมว่าโง่อีกเลย
You want androgynous or effeminate gay men? I told Sunset about U-Star's PP Crit, and also it will rip your heart out of your chest. Go watch it, but don't say I didn't warn you.
ให้มันมาติวกับพวกเราได้ปะ
นะ
คือกูไม่ชอบอ่ะคิดว่าเรากลับมาสนิทกันแล้วอ่ะ
มึงจะคิดมากทำไมกูก็สนิทกับมึงที่สุดอยู่แล้วไง
Kinposh stars Jeff Satur, androgyny, and Tong Thaniot, effeminate, and both of them serve absolute cunt at every given opportunity. Also, this show is full of sex and various triggering topics, so like, bear that in mind.
ปิดทำไมอ่ะกูชอบเอาเพลงนี้แหละจัดไป
You want mean, bitchy gay protagonists? Pran from Bad Buddy is my favorite guy. I cannot express how much I love him. Second favorite guy is actually two guys. Semantic Era has two very distinct flavors of mean bitch, one with angry autistic riz, and one with bisexual charisma stats through the roof, and both of whom I would lay down my life for at the drop of a hat.
어디 한번 잘해보시죠 사이코 선배님
응원 고마워 도라이 후배님
Why Are You is a Thai show where Saint plays a guy called Tutor who is just a sassy bitch all the time. People often think of him as like soft and cute, but they're confusing his character in this with his character in Love by Chance, who is really cute and innocent. Tutor, however, is a mean bitch, and I love him so much.
พี่กลัวผมไม่ดีกลัว
Lots of sex in this one though, so keep an eye out for that. Dangerous Romance, which is currently airing, literally has a piece of garbage bully as the love interest and a snarky bitch as its protagonist. 10 out of 10 so far, literally no notes. I am devouring it like a snake, just unhinging my entire jaw and eating it whole. I cannot wait for the next episode.
อยากเป็นพระเอกมากเลยอยากเป็นนางเอกวะล่ะ
You want more Switch representation? Bad Buddy exists. What more do you want?
โอ้ยมึงพักบ้างเหอะฮะไอ้พัดกูเอง
Okay, but seriously, Why Are You also has a Switch dynamic, and OnlyFriends has various dynamics across the many pairings and hookups. Pretty much everything JoJo and Backoff make refuses to conform to the idea of gay men only existing as tops and bottoms, so you can pretty much count their entire bodies of work.
ต้องทำยังไงต่อปะเนี่ยต้องออดอ้อนมึงแบบเสียค่าเสียขาอะไรอย่างงี้ปะกูทำไม่เป็นนะเว้ย
นั่งกินเหล้าฟังเพลงเพื่อนกูอะแค่นั้นพอแล้ว
คือเมื่อก่อนเวลาเรามีอะไรกับใครใช่ไหมเราคิดแค่ว่าเราอาจจะเสร็จไหมแต่กับมิวอะเรารู้สึกว่าเราแค่อยากทำให้มิวมีความสุขมากที่สุด
You want women?
Women are my favorite guy.
Gap the series. Gay and horny. And super cute, honestly.
ถ้าคิดจะอยู่บริษัทเนี้ยต้องเคารพกฎให้มากๆกฎอะไรเหรอคะกฎห้ามพนักงานในบริษัทคบกัน
The Warp Effect has multiple queer women and plotlines related to the difficulty of existing as a queer woman and wanting a quote-unquote normal life.
บิวนี่พี่มอลลี่พี่โรงเรียนบิวค่ะแฟนนิ่มสวัสดีค่ะ
Also, the side couple in Bad Buddy is a Woola-Woo couple, and I love them with my entire heart.
จริงๆสูงกว่าพาโอเคหมดแหละอยู่ด้วยแล้วสบายใจพาโอเคเนี่ยสบายใจปะสบายสิ
And the actresses are currently filming a GL that's set to come out hopefully later this year or early next year, and I cannot wait! You want trans plotlines? One of the side couples in Secret Crush on You is about a trans woman being scared to be her true self in front of the guy she has a crush on because she's worried he'll think she's a freak. Meanwhile, the guy is totally smitten for her and never gets her pronouns wrong once. This show's main plotline is real weird, and it's definitely not for everyone, but this side plot did not miss once.
แต่เห็นหนูทำขนาดเนี้ยหนูเป็นตุ๊ดนะ พี่ไม่รู้สึกแปลกหรอ แล้วบอกว่าอยากให้พี่เป็นเมีย พี่ก็เป็นให้ได้นะ แสดงว่าหนูกลับไปเป็นเหมือนเดิมได้แล้วใช่ไหมอะ
Also, Sylvie's character in The Warp Effect has a storyline about being non-binary and it made me cry a little bit, I won't lie.
คือผมมีคำถามนิดนึงไอ้คำว่า non binary เนี่ยมันคืออะไร
มันก็คือการที่เขาไม่ประสงค์ว่าจะระบุว่าเขาคือเพศชายหรือเพศหญิงอะค่ะพี่สยามมีปัญหาอะไรเปล่าคะ
แน่ใจเหรอว่าจะเอาผู้หญิงคนนี้เป็นนางเอก
And there are also plenty of shows in Thailand where trans people just show up and their transness isn't even addressed. They just exist as trans people, and it's so nice. Not Me does this, as does 3 Will Be Free, and honestly, every time Jenny Panan is on my screen, I am better for it.
มันอะไรกันนักกันหนาฮะเป็นไรคะเจอกันทุกวันน่ะหนูนั่นแหละเป็นอะไรคะเมื่อเช้ามันอะไรขนาดนั้นคะเหนื่อยยังเหนื่อยแล้ว
I love you, Queen! You want Ace Rep? Koisenu Futari is a Japanese show about narrow ace pair who deal with explaining their lives to their family and friends. It's very, very good. I cried, obviously.
私最近分かったんだけど多分アロマンティックでアセクシャルなの。アロマン？いい匂いするやつだ。私昔から全然分かんないの。恋愛とかキスとかセックスとか。セって何言ってんの？なんで子供早く作れとか言うのにセックスって言ったら怒るの？
And again, hitting it out of the park in terms of representation, The Warp Effect has an ace plotline in it.
แต่กูไม่ชอบทั้งลูกและรับไงเข้าใจปะไงว่ามึงไม่ได้ชอบทั้งลูกแล้วก็รับอ่ะกูเป็นเกย์แต่กูไม่ชอบเซ็กแบบเกย์อ่ะได้ไหมกูยังเป็นเกย์ได้อยู่ปะคือกูไม่เหมือนคนอื่นเว้ยกูไม่ชอบการสอดใส่กูไม่ชอบการเที่ยวบาร์เกย์แล้วแบบเนี้ยกูจะมีที่ยืนตรงไหนได้บ้าง
Because Jojo knows what the fuck he's about. Cherry Magic has an ace side character, and the main plotline, despite revolving around virginity, is also fairly ace-coded in a way that's really palatable, especially if you're on the sex-repulsed end of the spectrum. It's all romance and almost no physicality.
みんな恋愛の話好きだなとは思いましたけど。別に人生それだけじゃないっていうか、恋や愛がなくても毎日それなりに楽しいっていうか。
And finally, a shoulder to cry on isn't explicitly ace representation, but both in reading the manhwa and watching the show, I felt very seen and emotionally connected to it in an ace way. So do with that information what you will.
어때? 따뜻하지? 어때? 따뜻하지? 뽀뽀하고 싶은데. 야, 뭐래? 너 머릿속엔 도대체 뭐가 든 거야? 네가 들었다, 네가.
It is literally all out there. If you can think of an adjective to put before gay protagonist, you can probably find a show about them. And if you can't, there's almost definitely one in the works. Look, things are getting worse out there for the LGBTQ+ community, especially the T, or anyone even vaguely gender non-conforming. It's scary and it's hard. But that's why we have this community, and that's why we bond over this media, because we need something to look forward to feel safe engaging with, even if it's just for an hour a week. Pitting different shows against each other just because they don't all fit into neat boxes is pointless, and we all deserve better than to treat queer rep like the be-all and end-all of queerness, when sometimes it is allowed to just exist. I also want to briefly touch on something that I didn't get to in the rest of the essay, which is my opinions on sex scenes in media. How I used to be firmly in the camp of pointless sex scenes in media are bad, actually. And I think a lot of that comes from like a very male-gazy media landscape, right? Like a lot of times when you're watching a sex scene in something and it comes out of nowhere, I can't remember the name of the movie, but there's this movie that's Antonio Banderas and Angelina Jolie, and it's like an action film, and it's the whole movie is framed and shot in one way, and then they have a sex scene, and it's like they took it from a different movie and put it in the middle. Like the whole movie slows down for this sex scene because two hot people should be having sex on screen, and it's like, oh, I get that, but like it just feels pointlessly overt sometimes, and it feels very male-gazy in a lot of ways. A lot of mainstream television sex scenes feel like they're done to titillate people as opposed to tell the story. But I've really gone like a full 180 on that in the last couple of years, because as long as it's not like actively dehumanizing the people involved in the scene and it isn't too male gazy. I think pointless sex scenes in media are great. And I've mainly come around about this because of BL and yaoi, because why shouldn't we be telling stories about sex? It's a huge facet of human existence. It's not a thing that I like participating in, but it's a thing that a lot of people like participating in. And actually, the closest I will ever come to participating in it is reading and writing smut. To me, sex is a culmination of two characters' plot lines if the plot line is about romance. And sometimes it can be a point of contention if two characters hook up who aren't supposed to. That's part of why OnlyFriends is so popular, because there's different dynamics going on and all of them are messy and interesting. There's love plot lines, there's hookup plot lines, there's friends with benefit stuff, and it's all complicated and interesting and very, very human. There's a reason why smut fanfic is the most engaged with fanfic content over almost every other genre of fanfic content. Sex scenes in media don't exist because somebody's pushing an agenda. They exist because people like consuming them. And while I do think that sometimes it's a little bit excessive, if I'm not that interested, I can just watch something else. Sometimes that stuff just isn't for me. And that's perfectly okay. I've spent years of my life writing fanfictions. I've been quite a popular fanfic writer for various different fandoms, the 100 being a big one. My biggest fanfic in there for a while was kind of based around sex, and kind of not. But I've written a lot of like novel-length fanfictions that I've researched and spent months of time on. My most kudos fic is a horny semantic error fanfic that I wrote in an afternoon. I think that tells you everything that you need to know about the way people consume content. People like being horny. It's just a thing. It's just a fact of life. Look, I get that this is a nuanced issue and that not everybody is going to agree with me. I understand that. I would ask that if you go into the comments, please be respectful, not just of me, but of other people, of other perspectives, because as Satan's Ditties pointed out, having a generalized view of all people in relation to something can be incredibly harmful. Generalizing on the whole can be incredibly harmful. So I would ask, like, please engage in the comments. I would love to hear your opinions. I would love to hear your BL recs, your yaoi manga recs, your anime recs. I want to hear Western queer media recommendations. Feel free to share all that in the comments. Links keep getting blocked, obviously, so like try not to link stuff, but like, you know, write it out. It's incredibly important to me that this is a discussion and this is a safe space to have those discussions and not a place where people come to and then feel rejected or hurt by vitriol in the comments. This isn't TikTok. We're not doing that here. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who've suddenly shown up in the last couple of weeks. I have almost 10,000 subscribers now, which is so wild to think about. Like, I can't even process like how many people that is. It's crazy. So like, hello. Thank you for showing up. I hope that you all continue to engage with my content. I have a bunch of long form videos planned and I have a couple of shorter videos planned. I have one that's a bit weird and out of pocket that I'm hopefully going to get finished in the next couple of weeks, but maybe not. I'll keep you guys updated. But this is going to be like my last big one for a while. My next couple will hopefully be shorter. So if you're getting tired of the long content, don't worry, I have a couple of shorter videos in the works and then one really long one later, but that's not for a while. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Share the video with people if you think that it's worth sharing, and just be kind to yourself and others. Be kind, online and in person. And to close out the video, I will do a dramatic reading of a Tumblr post by Ruthko, which I feel sums up the video. The straight woman is unsatisfied with straight studio porn. She wants to get off to something in which the actors actually emote and show passion beyond canned moans from the women and, at best, vacant grunts from the men. She turns to gay porn. She knows it's not for her, but neither was the straight corn, and at least the actors look like they're enjoying themselves. And for a short while she is satiated by Sean Cody et al., but she runs into the same problems she had to begin with. She was not looking at sex, but a simulacrum of sex, trapped in Plato's cave. Unsatisfied, she turned to vintage gay porn, harkening to a time when most gay bars still had dark rooms and reliably smelled of piss and amyl nitrate. Here was the real thing, in all its animalistic passion, but she still couldn't immerse herself in the fantasy. She wanted the media to engage with her own imagination and meet her halfway, rather than having it spoon-fed to her own screen. She turned to yaoi, with its elongated figures reminiscent of Mannerist portraiture, then bara, including hardcore BDSM scenes. But the tactile sensations depicted on the pages didn't do justice to their real-life counterparts. She turned deeper into her own imagination, this time reading erotica. No, not the poolside paperback sold at Barnes & Noble. The good shit. Why then was she still not satisfied? She dug deeper, searching for the true meaning of eroticism. She studied the psychoanalysis of Freud, the cultural criticism of Susan Sontag, the feminist poetry of Audre Lorde. She took vacation time and flew to Europe, starting at the caves of Lascaux to explore the human urge to create, then traverse the Camino de Santiago on foot, along the way meeting a 56-year-old carpenter from Burgos named Andres, with whom she had an explosive affair. They both knew it couldn't last, which made them cherish each other's touch all the more. Upon flying home, she gave up. If her search for true eroticism never bore fruit this whole time, why would it now? It would take years before she stumbled upon the answer by pure happenstance. Dubstep.